Welcome to part 2 of my new video of 25 years in New Zealand. This part is about innocent encounters with the police, and first of all I'll talk about my encounters with the New Zealanders. Ever since I came to the country, all I've heard about is rugby and motor racing. So initially it was everything about the Springboks, who's playing who and who's won, and I don't care about rugby, I've never watched it. But sometimes in the mornings I'd wake up with the radio and they'd come on with the news, and if I knew that they were going to play Springboks versus All Blacks the night before, first thing I hear on the radio they start talking about rugby, I know the All Blacks won. They don't start talking about rugby afterwards, they wait till the end. Oh, by the way, New Zealand lost, because they don't want to broadcast that too much. But I just got sick of hearing about New Zealand versus South Africa rugby, so I got a t-shirt printed, and this was nearly 25 years ago, so you can hardly read it anymore. Said, I wish we could play rugby like the Springboks. And if I heard that South Africa won, I'd put that on, I'd walk into town, and the people just wouldn't make eye contact with me. They're so passionate about their rugby, and they sulk so much if they lose. On the back of the shirt, back in the days when Holden was still in the country, they left a year or two ago, I wrote, Ford and Holden are equal, both inferior to Toyota, because it was all about Ford versus Holden, and I told people, look, that's like the Special Olympics for cars, because they eliminated all the good contenders and just left Ford and Holden behind, so to see who could win between them. And someone would be talking about cars, and then they said, well, which do you prefer, Ford or Holden? And I'd say, which do you prefer, diarrhea or constipation? And then they'd have an idea of what I felt about those two particular brands. I'm an auto electrician, I work on cars, I fix problems on cars, and I know what not to use. Now, onto the subject of encounters with police in New Zealand. I would always consider myself to be a law-abiding citizen. I've always supported the police and appreciated the work that they've done. Always tried to stay on the right side of the law. But things are a bit different between New Zealand and South Africa. In South Africa there's certain things you can do with criminals that you can't do in New Zealand. If someone is robbing your house and you see them coming out of the door, you've got to step out of the way and let them past. You're not allowed to stop them. Of course, things do go wrong and you could have a good reason to defend yourself and make sure that your story is good if you do have to actually arrest the guy on your own. So, back in South Africa, as South Africans will know, other people around the world probably need to hear these stories if they haven't already heard them. People got so fed up with crime and violence, and the police were fed up with crime and violence. There were people who tried all sorts of things to protect innocent people and to deal with criminals. There's one guy who tried to market flamethrowers for cars so that you couldn't be carjacked, but that got banned. We kind of an unfair advantage over the criminals. I know of a story from probably 60 years ago. I was told that someone got so fed up with break-ins in his car, he got a half jack of whiskey, put in a glove box, and in that bottle of whiskey was a teaspoon of arsenic. One day his car got stolen, they found the guy down the road, he got done for premeditated manslaughter. Then there's another time when someone actually got away with something like that. It was a shopkeeper, an Indian man out in the rural area, and he was also so sick of his shop being broken into. He had razor wire, he had locks, he had done everything he could, but there was this one little window that they just seemed to have managed to squeeze through. So he wired up a shotgun pointing at that window. Sure enough, one day he comes in and there is half of a kid lying on the outside of the shop, the other half lying on inside the shop. They were taking these kids and pushing them through the windows to open from inside. It went to court and they actually let him off. They said he had taken every reasonable precaution to stop people going in, just on the condition that he doesn't do it again, of course. So these are the type of things that happen in South Africa, and you can get away with a certain amount of, we'll call it self-defense, when dealing with criminals. Before I left, this is about 26 years ago, this is probably year 2000, 1999, one morning the guy I worked for came into the office and he said, I want to tell you what happened last night, on Sunday night. He lived in the second last house in a cul-de-sac, a dead-end road, and he heard this noise outside. He looked out the window and there's a half a dozen kids trying to break into his neighbour's car. He phoned up his neighbour and he says to him, give me 2 minutes to get outside and then run outside and shout at them. He takes his pick handle. Every South African's got a translator or interpreter of some sort handy in case he has to defend himself. He goes and stands behind the garage and he hears his neighbour screaming, and he steps out and he swings. And he said this guy's head stopped, his body went up and he fell straight down there. That's the kind of justice you end up having to mete out in South Africa. Phoned the police turned up, Indian police officer, and he walks up and he looks and there's this kid lying on the floor, still groaning, with his teeth next to him on the ground. And he says to the guy I work with, should have killed him, it's less paperwork. That's the attitude in South Africa. You know, people are absolutely so sick of what goes on there and the crime and the violence. The police would rather you just kill someone. Another story that I heard from a New Zealander a few years ago. He said to me, you know what, I used to live in South Africa. 10 years ago, I flew over there. I had a job over there, and I arrive at the airport. My sister picks me up. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, driving down the highway, and this African man runs out in front of us and he doesn't make it, and whack, he gets knocked flying. And she stops. There's some police nearby who saw it. They come walking over. She says to her brother, stay there, do not get out of the car. It'll just cause a confrontation. Don't say anything or do anything. He sits in the car. Policeman comes walking along. He looks at the guy lying on the road there with a broken leg, and he walks up to the car and he thinks, oh no. Taps on the window. Guy winds his window down, and the policeman says, excuse me sir, I think that capper broke your headlight. And that's the regard for human life in South Africa. You know, these people, there's so many of them, there's so many criminals, people running across the road, and when you hit him, you broke your headlight. And he said he lived in South Africa for about 4 or 5 years, and then he made plans to return. He was so sick of the crime and the violence, and he was there in the last week, and he drives down. He said his driveway was down a slope, goes down his driveway, pops the garage door. While it's opening, he has to get out to do something, and these two guys come down the driveway and they're shooting at him. And one of them hits him in the leg and he falls down on the ground. He pulls out his gun and he says he emptied 11 bullets into one of them. The other one got away. Now things moved so quickly there. He's coming out of the hospital with his leg all bandaged up. The policeman says, I'm here to take you to your trial, the court. Your court case is due at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Goes off to court, walks in there, the judge walks and sits down, and he thinks, oh no, the judge is a black man too, I'm done for. And the judge says to him, sir, I have a problem with you. And he says, look, they were shooting at me. I had to shoot back. He says, that's the problem I have with you. Why did you only shoot one of them? Why didn't you kill both of them? The judges in South Africa want you to kill the people. Of course, you've got to make sure you've got a good reason for it, but the crime in the country is so bad and the courts are so overloaded. They just want the criminals to die. But things are very different in New Zealand. As I mentioned in my first video, introduction, I've always liked knives. You know, they're a very useful tool to have, and there's always something you can do with them. But things are pretty strict in New Zealand. I go into the police station after about a month, and I said to the guys, I wait in line there. The guy said, yes, yep, how can I help you? I said, I'm new in New Zealand, just come over from South Africa. He probably told from the accent. I don't want any trouble, so I want to know, is the knife I carry too big? He said, how big is it? So I said to him, it's this big. And his eyes go like this, and he says, you take that off you and you lock it away. And like an idiot, I said, oh, you want to try and take it off me? And just being smart, I should have kept my mouth shut. He says, no, you take it off and you lock it away. He said, if you're caught with that knife on you, especially concealed like that, you'll spend the night in jail, and then you'll have to stand before a judge to say why you've got it on you. I said, it's a useful tool. That's why I carry it. He says, no, you conceal it like that, it's a weapon. I said, I conceal it because people freak out when they see it. He says, no. He says, you carry that on you, you're going to go to jail. I said, okay, and I pulled out another little knife, and I said to him, it's this little knife on my keyring, what about this? He said, that's fine. You can carry it on you, you can pull it out in public and use it, but if you're ever caught doing something wrong, you'll be charged for it, which is fair enough, makes a lot of sense. In New Zealand, the traffic police, I didn't see this in South Africa, have radars inside their cars. If they are driving towards you, they can tell what speed you're doing. And they're watching your speed. They can be driving behind you or towards you, and this thing calculates how fast they're going and works out how fast you're going, and you can be charged for speeding. There's also a fair amount of unmarked police cars. So one day, I pull up at the traffic lights. I stay in the middle lane, the right lane, because the lane next to me has also got a left turn right of way when the lights change. Now let me stay on this side, so that if someone needs to turn, they can park next to me. The car pulls up next to me, and sitting there waiting, lights change green, I start accelerating, and this car next to me starts accelerating faster. And I thought, the road narrows over there. There's not going to be enough space for this, so I put my foot down even further, and she starts accelerating even more. I thought, what the heck? I whack it into second, and I floor it, and I just get in front of the car as the road narrows, and I watch my speed limit, and I'm just touching 60 k's an hour, which was a speed limit. So I took my foot off, and a little blue and red light starts flashing on the dash of the car. It was an undercover police car. They baited me. She was trying to get me to break the speed limit. I pull over, wind my window down. I was very respectful. She walks up and says, that was some aggressive driving from you there. And I said, from you too. She said, no, but you didn't have to accelerate like that. I said, well, neither did you. And she said, yeah, but you could have let me pass. I said, well, there wasn't much space. The road was narrowing, so I just thought it's best to get in front of you. So she goes back to the police car, and the guy's sitting in the passenger seat, and he's obviously doing checks on my registration and my name and everything like that. They decided, well, I haven't done anything wrong in the past. She walks back up to the window, and she says, right, I'm not going to give you a fine this time. And I thought, that's my chance. I'm going to get my money's worth out of this. And I said to her, look, please don't take this the wrong way. But when I accelerated and you started accelerating on the inside lane, and I saw we're running out of space, the road's going to narrow like that, I thought, you're a woman, you probably don't know how to drive properly, so I better get in front of you before there's an accident. And her face went red and purple and blue, and she got this army look on her face. She turned and stormed off. And then I watched in my rearview mirror, and I saw her get into the car, and her head's going up and down, and she's talking and going on like this, and then he packs up laughing. I thought, okay, time to drive away. So that was my second encounter with the police. Totally innocent. I believe it was her fault. She was trying to make me speed, and I didn't break the speed limit. She drove dangerously. Next thing. This one's a big one. I didn't even have residence yet for the country. I was just there on a work permit. It was the first year or so. I bought an air rifle. In South Africa we call it a pellet gun. I bought an air rifle, and a friend sold me the scope for it. I put the scope on, and I thought, I need to set the scope. So I go back into the police station. I said, look, bought an air rifle. Can I shoot this in my backyard? He said, no, you got to go outside the city limits if you want to shoot. I said, okay, in Hamilton there's an archery range. Big open field next to a road and targets and everything. I mean, they shoot arrows there. Don't practice there. He said, no, you've got to go outside the city limits. So I said, okay, fine. It's Sunday morning. I'll drive out to the industrial area. Big open fields. There's one building there. If we go to the map of Hamilton, I can show you where that building is. It was the only building in the area 25 years ago. And big open ground. And I set up some tin cans and I'm shooting these tin cans. And adjusting my scope and shooting and adjusting. And it's looking quite good. And then on the side of the road someone had trashed a car. Because it costs money to dump a vehicle, they'll file off the chassis number and the engine number, go and park it somewhere and set it on fire. So they'd set this car on fire. I sat there for a while shooting the taillights out. That was good. Go back, set up the tin cans again. Shooting. I thought, this is perfect. I'll take my air rifle and I turn around and there's two police cars. And this big guy in the bulletproof vest jumps out and he's put the rifle down. Now, for 1/1000th of a nanosecond, I thought, should have pointed at him. And my brain said to me, you do not want to die of instant lead poisoning. So I said to him, it's an air rifle. He said, put it down. So I put it down on the ground. The other car drives up. The woman on the passenger seat got a shotgun on her lap. They all got bulletproof vests on, the Armed Defenders Squad. And this guy gets out and he said, we got a report of someone discharging a firearm in a public place. I said, it's just an air rifle. He said, well, classified as a firearm. I said, I didn't have to get a firearms license. They said, you would if you were under 18. I said, okay, I'm not going to argue. You know, I'm in their country and I'm just happy that I'm not in South Africa anymore. There's no point having an argument with them. The guy said, what pellets are you using? I said, I'm using these pellets here. I went and showed him in the back of my van. I had them sitting there. I'd been taking some and put in my pocket. And he goes to have a look and he said, are these the only pellets you got? I thought, why would I get 2 lots of pellets? Yeah, I said, of course they're the only pellets I got. But I'm trying to back away from my van because there's 2 machete handles sticking out there. And I had my favourite machetes with me in my work van. And you never know when you'll need them. So I'm trying to move away so they don't see those. And this other guy's taking the air rifle and he's looking down the barrel and everything. I don't know what that was going to accomplish. He says, you know, it's pretty dangerous discharging a firearm in a public place. I said, well, I went into the police station this week. And I said, where can I shoot there? They said, outside the city limits. So I came there. I said, I thought I was doing the right thing. He said, no, this is still inside the city limits. I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. And then the other cop said, well, you know, there's over there in that direction, there's a bicycle, mountain biking range. If someone's head pops up and you're shooting there. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to argue. I don't want any trouble. You know, I've just got to abide with New Zealand's laws. Then he says, I'm going to confiscate the air rifle, but I'm not going to arrest you this time. I said, what do you mean arrest me? He says, it's a serious offence, discharging a firearm in a public place. I said, okay, well, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I'm really sorry about that. And the main issue was that Friday, 2 days earlier, some kid had got shot in the neck with an air rifle. So everyone was in heightened tensions around that area. If I'd known that, I would have found somewhere else to go. But the next day, I actually had the Monday off anyway. The next day I went to the police station. They gave it back to me with 4 brochures on gun safety. And the officer that gave it back to me said, I don't know why you weren't arrested. He said, any other officer would have arrested you. So I went home and I wrote a letter of appreciation and I posted to the police station. I said, so just give that guy a pay rise. I appreciate the way he treated me. And sorry what I did, but I won't do it again now that I know. So that's the best thing, is don't have that South African attitude of, don't tell me what to do, I wasn't doing it. And, you know, you got to just be humble and accept that you're in a different country, you got to do things their way. So that was my innocent encounters with the police in New Zealand. And hopefully anyone thinking of moving here takes to heart what I've said, and just remember you are in a different country. The rules are very different in New Zealand. Criminals have more rights than they should have, but you just got to be happy that you're out of South Africa once you're over here and just obey the laws. And like I said to the policeman after he said he's got it confiscated, I said, actually, you know what, this just makes me feel safer, because back in South Africa, when the blacks were lowering their coffins into the grave, they'd pull out their guns and shoot in the air, and you'd have bullets landing in your roof. So I'm just glad that things are this way over here.